Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who have their natal Jupiter in the sign of Sagittarius. And so this is quite fortunate because Jupiter rules Sagittarius. And so this is like double your pleasure, double your luck. So Jupiter is the planet that is associated with luck, and it's associated with optimism, and it's associated with growth. Jupiter is a big planet, so Jupiter dreams big. And so this influence in your life, even though Jupiter is not a personal planet and is not supposed to color your personality per se, it can indicate the area or areas where if you kind of direct your attention or you give at least some attention to, you can attract a lot of good fortune. And actually, speaking of fortune, in the tarot, the Wheel of Fortune card is connected to Jupiter. So, it has that theme of being lucky. And so, that's why it's important to know about your Jupiter so that you can really emphasize those things in life, especially if your sun sign is quite different than your Jupiter sign, because actually you don't want to really focus too much on the sign that Jupiter is in. This is not going to be all that personal to you. It's really the house it's in. And I will be doing those, videos eventually. I wanted to start with the signs, Jupiter in the signs. And of course, they're going to have very similar characteristics. But it's more important with these planets that are not personal planets to look at what house they occupy. And so if you know your chart, you can figure that out very easily. But in terms of Jupiter being in Sagittarius, it's going to have the effect of creating a lot of optimism within a person. Now, the thing, I just got done telling you that it doesn't affect you personally. Well, in using this website, theastrocodex.com, that's what they say. So, yeah, it is pretty contradictory. I would say that, of course, we're going to see an influence to some degree, but it may be kind of a mini generational influence where everybody who's born within your year, your classmates, for instance, that they might have similar characteristics. But in any case, this kind of attitude should definitely be nurtured if you don't feel like you have this already. So that would be one thing to do, is to emphasize positive thinking if you feel kind of like cynical. So I'm talking to you, Sun in Capricorns and Sun in Scorpios, and I don't know, people who are a little bit more skeptical, who tend to see the glass half empty, or for some reason, they don't believe that life is inherently positive, that there's a lot of problems in the world, and some people just think they're being pragmatic, maybe if your sun is in Virgo, you can see the flaws in things and you might want to make it better, but you don't think that it is already okay. But you see, I think that Sagittarians are visionaries. So Jupiter in Sagittarius, encourages being a visionary, which means that it is like looking at the future, not making predictions like a psychic, but seeing the bigger picture, and this is definitely how Jupiter in Sagittarius rolls. So, how this can manifest, or how you can take advantage of this influence, is to look at the bigger picture in life, to not just see the small details, but see how it connects, make those connections to from the mundane to the spiritual. Because a lot of times when, let's say somebody is interested in being a reformer, they're I guess, I don't know, like what kind of career path that is. Let's say somebody wants to go into politics because they really do want to improve societal conditions. If you just focus on all of the problems, and you're not enough of a visionary that you can envision this world where X, Y, and Z happens, it doesn't mean that you're having some literal psychic vision, but you can see how things are going to progress. If you don't have that ability, you're going to get mired in those problems. So this is one of the gifts of having Jupiter in Sagittarius, is that it can give you that sense of the possible. And and I was mentioning different signs, like even Taurus. Any sign, I'm speaking about the earth signs, because a lot of times somebody who has a sun in an earth sign, they really want tangible proof. But the problem is that the ninth house, which Jupiter rules, is about abstract knowledge. It's not an earth house. It's a mental house. So it's looking at things from an intangible vantage point. It's not something that you can prove. This is a God house. So how are you going to prove the existence of God? And really, faith plays such a part in religious and spiritual beliefs. And people who are obsessed with having that tangible proof of things can feel a sense of limitation, because when they don't get that, when they're dependent on the physical, it's hard to bridge that gap. And so if you do have a sun sign in earth, or even air, ironically, because air is not physical, but air signs do tend to rely on the intellect. And if they think that God is, irrational, then they're not going to go along with that either. And I'm not saying that earth and air signs are atheists. I'm just saying that sometimes philosophy is a hard thing for people to buy into, because they just are attached to their need for logic and for proof. So, keep that in mind if that's something that you're dealing with. So, you will gain from foreign travel. Sometimes if there's hard angles, or I'm not going to get into all of the specifics with this, but you are somebody who just really wants to, especially with the mind, to have it grow, okay? So you may be interested in academic pursuits, and this could also relate to perhaps a career in academia, and because Jupiter is in this in its own sign, in the sign that it rules, you may be somebody who's not content to have a bachelor's degree. Even if you do go to college, You might want to have the full Monty and have like a PhD. That's that expansion that we're talking about. And you may be really interested in learning foreign languages. You'll be lucky in doing so. And, this is, again, talking about what is luck. Is luck random, dropping from the sky into your lap? Or is it opportunities that present themselves to you that you have free will to accept or reject? And I think that if, let's say, due to the characteristics of this placement, that you learn a foreign language, that can benefit you because you may love to travel around the world. And that could be very fortunate for you to do so and open a lot of doors. But again, it could be because you're teaching, you're a traveling professor and something along those lines. So it can all be connected. And it could be really something which opens your world, that it expands other people's minds. And, I was just thinking, since this can be associated even like with writing, with Sagittarius, you might even travel to have the experiences that you put into your books. Sometimes people like to experience certain things and then they can write about them. So you could say it's almost like doing research for your next book, Now, the other thing too is the spiritual connection. So, and also ethics, these kinds of things, the law, all of these things are connected, because if you've ever heard somebody reciting a biblical verse, let's say, it's like chapter and verse, it's like reading law from a law book, legal, type of a book, where you're just citing, the dictates. And there's a love of learning that will probably be with you for the rest of your life. But again, this is something that you would have to, I was going to say, indulge in, or, take part in. Your view of life, your philosophy of life is not rigid. So and part of this, Sagittarius is a mutable sign, but you really believe, that's part of what expansion growth is all about, is that you can make room for other things, changing your philosophy. It might not be radically changing it, but it might be a new piece of information coming to you that can help you tweak what you believe is true about life. And I think one of the most important things about Jupiter in Sagittarius, which is true of Sagittarius in general, people who have a prominent Sagittarius, is that there's the synthesis of knowledge, or, and even abstract knowledge. It's not about, statistics. And this is such a big thing today, where we're given this data, and this is supposed to be proof of something. Jupiter in Sagittarius wants to transcend the mundane. So, those facts and figures are interesting, but they don't tell the whole picture. So you're taking that, and it's not that you will reject it, but you will be able to take that and then elevate it into something much more profound. And so if you're arguing about some kind of social issues, or if you're dealing with, the question of morality, whatever the debate is about, you can take an issue and you can speak on it from different vantage points. The spiritual context, the mundane, factual context, the political, the historical, and bring those all together, which is really, I feel, is very important because it's all inclusive. It's very, universal. I mean, it's like, much more substantial. And I think that that's what, Jupiter is about, expansion, but expansion in all directions, not just, otherwise it's like tunnel vision. Publishing is associated with the ninth house that Jupiter rules. So a person who has this placement may have a large library in their home. When I say library, a collection of books, let's say. You may have a career that is connected to books. So if you're not a publisher or a writer, you may own a bookstore. The thing is that Jupiter can be about, sheer quantity. So that's where it comes from. Like if you own a bookstore, you got a lot of books around you and that kind of thing. And this, the situation with, professions, we could be talking about, if you're not selling books or publishing them, you could be speaking about them, through what you're doing for a living, like a teacher. And I was even thinking like a book critic. They don't mention it here, but that would be a possibility as well. Somebody who is really well read, and then they, especially if your sun or Mercury is in Virgo, or maybe an air sign like Gemini or Aquarius, Libra too, but Libra is so into being very diplomatic. I wonder how many literary critics are Sun in Libra. But anyway, that ability to kind of really analyze things related to books. But Codex, the Astral Codex mentions also, what was the other career? They said correspondence, translators or correspondents in other countries. Yeah, I mean, I suppose like a foreign correspondent for a news service. I guess that would be a possibility. And hey, any kind of business that you have that doesn't require you being there in person, and you can do over the internet. So if you have an online business, what they call digital nomads, where you can travel and indulge in your love of travel and then run your business from far-flung places. That could also be what you're into. How about tourism? Maybe like I mean, I don't think I saw anything like this. Travel, I guess they don't have many travel agencies these days, but perhaps being a tour guide, where you are communicating information, history about these foreign places, and you weren't born there, but you're living in these places and you learn about them. And of course, the idea of optimism, going back to that idea, even being a life coach, that would be a perfect occupation for somebody who has this placement. Again, you should also look at where Jupiter is in your chart to get even more personalized instruction on how to make the most of this particular planet and placement. But the thing about optimism to me, and thinking about the law of attraction, is that if you perceive life as working in your favor rather than life being against you, even if something happens that you don't want, you can still flip the script. You can still see it as you can see the silver lining. You can see the lesson that you learned from that, on what not to do in the future. You can always find a way of obtaining or deriving some luck, or, well, maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but something good coming out of it. And especially with this position, you may even attribute it to part of your spiritual growth. And that in and of itself is a positive way of dealing with a setback, for instance. So it's really a wonderful thing, people who have this placement, and I hope that this made you feel better, or pumped you up. And so thank you for listening. If you would like a personal reading, I do this all the time. I like to analyze charts, and then I can find out which house your Jupiter is in too. But so the link to my website is below, and take care. Bye.